Ladies and gentlemen, in this corner we have the newcomer, the challenger, the prodigal son of FPS, battered and beaten but ready for more, Battlefield 2042! And in this corner, selling a whopping 7 million copies to date, poised to level the competition into submission, Battlefield 4!
Welcome one and all, Battlefield friends. This is Hit You Good, your favorite all-American freedom-loving gamer, and in today's episode, we're going to look at how Battlefield 2042 stacks up against what I believe is the heavyweight champion of the series, Battlefield 4. Now that Battlefield 2042 has actually entered the weight class of being a real Battlefield title since Update 3.2, now we can more accurately compare the two. Today I'm going to be taking several different factors, several different categories, and rating each game on a scale of 1 to 10, and at the end we'll put all those numbers together and find out just who is the reigning champion. Battlefield 2042 or a Battlefield title that turns 10 years old this year.
Now, before we start, let's take a look at what the audience thinks. And holy cow, it's a landslide prediction for the current champion. 90% of the audience voted for Battlefield 4 being the better game. Let's see if that holds true tonight. So let's get started off first with the graphics of these two games, starting off with 2042. As it stands now, the graphics in this game are pretty solid. Reflections of water and mud, especially the explosion particles, are really spot on. When large assets of the map explode, it will very often take my attention and focus off the game at hand, and I just gotta sit and watch, especially with the new Easter egg that they just introduced with the rocket flying the building at Nordvik. I think that's really cool. The shockwave from some of these larger explosions are just amazing. Character models are pretty decent, graphically speaking, that is. I wish you could just pick a skin and run with it instead of being forced to play whichever gender fluid character has the gadgets or abilities that we want, but we'll talk about that later. The skins of the vehicles look pretty badass, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm giving 2042 an 8 on graphics. It's not completely earth-shattering, and it's definitely good enough for today's standards, but it also doesn't stand out among its competitors either, so I'm awarding a solid 8 here. Now, Battlefield 4 should come up a good bit short on this measure, being 9 years old, 10 years old later this year. However, I do have to give some props for it in its time. It was pretty dang revolutionary during its day. In the modern era, sure, you gotta give it to them. I mean, it's age for sure. The explosions, however, they still look fine. The animations are perfectly acceptable, even by today's standards, and I'm not really left wanting for anything from the graphics in this game, but since 2042 does hold an edge in this, I'm giving Battlefield 4 a 6, judging by today's standards.
So that kicks off round 1 with Battlefield 2042 holding a very slight edge over the dinosaur in the room, 8-6.
Now on to sound design. Now starting off with Battlefield 4, Battlefield 4's audio is just as good as to be expected for a game in its time. The gun sounds are varied, the explosions are decent, footsteps are audible when things are a little quieter, and I can usually ascertain where shots or voices are coming from when I'm in a building and things aren't exploding around me. Now, comparing this to the probably 10 rating that I would give to Battlefield 1, I'm going to leave Battlefield 4 as a 6.
I'll wait for his
now, 2042 hasn't really blown my socks off in this category either. Both games seem to be a little lackluster in this. Maybe not lackluster, but just meh. It seemed like it might have been afterthought. Yeah, it's got audio. I found difficulty in tracking where sounds are coming from in 2042. Even though they may seem decidedly like someone is coming around from a certain angle, I'll end up getting clapped from the opposite direction. And I'm sure I don't have my headphones on backwards. I'm positive. Also, when you're in certain places with a lot of metal, such as the ship in Stranded, you really can't utilize any auditory cues to help your gameplay. There's so much metal pinging around from the landing of bullets everywhere. It's just audible chaos. And maybe it's designed that way, but I would like to have things a little bit more buttoned up just for a gameplay sake. But I'm giving 2042 a solid 5 here.
So coming out of round 2, we got Battlefield 4 just barely trailing the newcomer at 13-12.
Now let's look at matchmaking for both of these games, starting off with Battlefield 2042. Well, there's a lot to be desired here, since DICE made the decision to not include the server browsers such as every Battlefield title has had up to this point. Matchmaking isn't a terrible experience, but it's not a great one either. There's no vote for maps in between rounds, and the game doesn't pull you out if your party leader decides to leave. That's a little frustrating. There'd be plenty of times I'd load into the next match when my party leader had decided to leave. Considering that 2042 does not currently have skill-based matchmaking, though, got to give it some decent props for that. So instead of giving it a 3, the no skill-based matchmaking, at least for now, I can bump this up to a 5 in this category. Battlefield 4, on the other hand, has pretty much everything that we all wanted. A server browser, map voting, no skill-based matchmaking. Not only does a server browser ensure that skill-based matchmaking won't be making a return or become a thing in the future, but it also lets us play with our favorite communities as well. It's really nice to kind of hop into a Battlefield 4 server and see some familiar faces. 2042, on the other hand, just launches us into another random server and breaks that community down. Sure, sometimes it will keep a squad together, but most times I don't see anybody that I know. Also, map voting helps ensure that servers are going to stay fuller for longer. And it ensures that the majority of players will indeed want to play on the next upcoming map. Now, there's plenty of times that I'll leave the match queuing in 2042 just because Hourglass shows up. I don't want to play Hourglass. I don't know anybody that does want to play Hourglass. And we can't vote against it. The only thing that I may be able to criticize for Battlefield 4, maybe, is the team balancing, as in some cases one team can occasionally just steamroll the other team, but that's not a huge complaint and can often be resolved with some sneaky flanking. Considering there's not much want for here, Battlefield 4 gets a very solid and impressive 8. Now, this is a round that everyone has been waiting for. This is the round where we look at the game's selection of maps. Now, I'll be judging this based on design, on flow, and variety. Now, starting off with Battlefield 4, the maps in this game offer a massive amount of variety, from the vast plains of Silk Road to the infantry-only meat grinder of Operation Metro and Locker, jungle combat in Operation Outbreak to the stark contrast of the snowy waste of Operation Whiteout. This game doesn't only have maps that cover different styles of gameplay, but offers completely different locations and biomes across this broad spectrum. After all the DLC had come out, Battlefield 4 had a whopping 33 maps for players to play on, including the night map on Zavad 311, which was pretty dang awesome. Now, not only do we have a wide variety, but so many of these maps have many options for flanking routes, even on maps prone to bottlenecks. Every now and then, one side can either break through one flank, or maybe even a lone wolf can sneak through and have his squad spawn on him and totally upend the entire match. This was back in the day where game developers were actually gamers themselves instead of high-level marketing PhDs with, psychology minors. And it's obvious here that the devs put so much in the maps for people to explore, find Easter eggs, unlock puzzles, and give out plenty of references from the community, such as several from the community-acclaimed Battlefield Friends series from Neebs Gaming, including putting a Megalodon in the game. Ride of the Valkyries would play. If you were on the US side and you were flying a transport heli out of Operation Outbreak, that was awesome. The Levolution that would change the outcomes of matches at the time was absolutely earth-shattering in the gaming community. And many of these maps offer verticality, flow, and there's not really any map that I hop on and think, oh, I'll go play for another server. There's no map that I really don't like, and plenty that I think are absolutely awesome. Battlefield 4 gets a very impressive 10 out of 10 on this one. Let's see if it's enough to knock out Battlefield 2042. But, well, 2042, it's got maps, for sure, so it at least gets a 1. And it's got a total of 10, with another map coming out in Season 4 and supposedly another one in Season 5, which that's good. So, but even months from now, Battlefield 2042 will still only have 12 maps compared to the 33 maps that Battlefield 4 has. That being said, the DICE team really has improved a lot of these for sure. They were garbage when the game first came out. It wasn't fun playing. Many that were totally barren and unplayable for infantry are now pretty fun and match some of the pacing from previous Battlefield titles. They've added a lot of cover, made them look more immersive for the story they're going for, and in most cases they've done all right. But unfortunately, we still got Hourglass, which is completely boring and still void of cover pretty much anywhere on the map. And if you don't have a vehicle, or if you're not sniping from a mile away, you're getting wrecked. Kaleidoscope still kind of has similar problems as well, not quite as bad as Hourglass, but still. And as far as destruction, it's minimal, with the only thing that even remotely compares to Battlefield 4's Levolution, and not even that, is being able to take a sign off the top of a building. It's pretty lackluster for the most part. But considering a few extra maps in Portal mode, considering in Season 4 they're coming out with a new map that supposedly has a building that can completely collapse, we'll see if that's true, and maybe they do the same thing with some other maps down the road. Now we've got some Easter eggs that have been introduced, which gives it that real Battlefield 4 vibe and allows the Easter egg community to thrive again. I was going to have this at a 4, but I will bump it up to a 5.
At the conclusion of this round, Battlefield 2042 has simply seen better days, nearly taking a knockout punch from Battlefield 4, who is still leading this fight.
Now let's look at these games' campaigns. Well, it pretty much looks like 2042 forgot to bring his boxing gloves to the ring for this particular round and is completely helpless, considering that Battlefield 2042 doesn't even have a campaign. So let me confirm. Yeah, they used all the resources that'd be used on a campaign to polish a multiplayer into a masterpiece, right? I mean, that would explain no campaign, right? Hang on, oh, what? Oh, the multiplayer was trash at launch? Okay, alright, I'll tell him. Yeah, 2042 gets a 0. Big fat goose egg on this, regardless of the character bios, regardless of all the marketing teasers. It doesn't have a world that I'm really that interested in, and I don't want to just read bios in order to try to get immersed in this game. Big fat 0. Now, on the other hand, Battlefield 4 is, you know, it's not that great, but hey, at least it has one, right? Generic and linear, yes, for sure, big time, but at least there's some multiplayer payoffs to unlock 2 weapons in the end-game decision. It's a decent tutorial of sorts, good graphics, large-scale events, but a story that still really doesn't draw me in or make me genuinely care about the character. So I'm giving this a 5 for the campaign.
And with that, 2042 escapes what could have been disaster that Battlefield 4 brought its A game. Battlefield 4 still extending the lead here.
Now let's look at weapon selection. In Battlefield 4, the weapon selection is absolutely off the chain, launching with a massive 86 weapons and then boosting that number to 107 through a multitude of DLC packs. Battlefield 4 is almost the unrivaled king in the FPS market when it comes to weapon variety. This is what lends in part to that sandbox style of game that we really enjoy, because so many firearms are good at a handful of things, and picking which one works best for what situation is key to excelling in a match. Because of this, also, there's not exactly a determined meta in the game, so to speak, and I'm really happy because of that. But there are some guns that are considered quote-unquote best, but they're considered so not because they're OP, but because they are the most versatile in the game, lending to the broadest circumstances possible within a match. A few of those are the Ace 23, my favorite, the M416, and the Scar, just to name a few. Weapon customization is almost on par with 2042 and broke another mold back in the day of its release. With 107 weapons, I don't see how you could go with anything less than a 9 on this scale. The only thing that I could contrive just to think up something that would make this a 10 would be the style of customization we had in Call of Duty 2019. But even then, adding that much more customization could be far too much for a game that already has 107 guns. So Battlefield 4 gets a solid 9 out of 10. Now in 2042, once again, the content in the game just isn't up to par. 2042 launched with 22 weapons, and while we had a decent amount of vault weapons such as the M416, ACWR, M14, MTAR, all of those, most of them really do not perform well at all. They've got limited attachments, they have no extra skins, and no reward for progressing the weapons to Tier 1. It's all pretty lackluster. Now, one benefit that 2042 has on Battlefield 4 is being able to swap weapon attachments on the fly, which I do enjoy using at times. Even still, the customization UI is clunky and sometimes confusing. Really hard on this, and I'm giving 2042's weapon selection a 5.
Man, what a shellacking 2042 has taken during this round. They simply don't have the content to be able to stand up to Battlefield 4. The fight continues.
And in the 7th and final round, each contender has to compete for an overall score for how much fun the game is in general. How often do I play this one night and not want to hop off or want to play the next day? So with 2042, it's been kind of hit or miss before the 3.2 class rework patch, and I'd say maybe a decent 6, like right before it. But since then, the class system really has balanced a lot out, and I do appreciate it. I do think it was a mistake to not restrict the weapons to the classes and add further structure to the game, but some changes they made ended up working better than Battlefield 4, like giving support all the medical gadgets and perks and giving LMGs to engineers. Some of that I think really is brilliant. I wish we could swap out perks and kit our soldiers out to be how we want them to be, but alas, if you want to fly around like a squirrel all match, you'll have to embody the proud them, they, gender fluid character of Sundance, or the old lady that somehow has the physical dexterity of a Navy SEAL. Overall, I give 2042 a pretty solid 7 out of 10. It's not enthralling, not earth-shattering, but it's definitely not the absolute garbage that it was at launch. Now for Battlefield 4, I have to say I'm not always in the mood for this, but dang, when I do get in the mood, it's a good 2 or 3 weeks straight, probably a month of playing it just solid. I may be a little biased just because of the nostalgia, but going back to Battlefield 4 just takes me back to an absolute golden era of gaming. There was no woke bullshit, no microtransactions, no seasons, just strong content and hundreds of hours of fun. The roles are balanced very well within the game, and it really is the definition of a sandbox-style gaming platform. No other Battlefield has so naturally recreated those only in Battlefield moments, and I think it may end up being one of those games that will forever have a player base, or at least I hope so. So for this, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10 for fun. The only thing holding me back from giving it a 10 is some unbalanced gameplay related to UCAV spammers, which unfortunately they are more prevalent than yesteryear, which can lead to just logging off and joining with other servers. But there you have it, folks. With a final score of 54-35, the 70 million copies sold champion of Battlefield will retain the title as the greatest installment of the Battlefield series. Just as the audience had predicted, Battlefield 4 easily walked away with the trophy and will probably not have to worry about any contenders anytime soon.
Now, if you agree or disagree with anything that happened in today's contest, leave your comments below. Give us your own points down and what you think is the greatest Battlefield game of all time, and who knows, maybe we might do a similar video as that. Definitely encourage you to hop on Battlefield 4. But with that, guys, thank you for watching this video. Happy gaming. God bless. Hit you good. Out.